everyone, so today I am here to do my November wrap-up. November wasn't the worst reading month I've had, but it definitely wasn't my best. Mostly I just had to read a lot of books for school and for research, so that's what the majority of this wrap-up is going to be. I read a total of 18 books, which is a lot of books, but again, it was a lot of school and a lot of research, so I didn't get to read the books that I personally wanted to read, which makes it like less of a good reading month in my personal opinion. So I'm just gonna wrap up everything for you guys. Again, I did read 18 books, so I'm just gonna tell you guys what they were. Basically, November was just a really busy month for me, mostly because of school. I also started a new job, as well as the holidays. I like to just take a complete kind of break from social media, as well as YouTube and reading. So I don't know, November was a lot. We're getting into finals. The end of the year is always just really, really busy. So I don't always do the most reading. So sorry if this one is a little bit boring with just a lot of school books. But as usual, I will start with the books that I read for pleasure. So the first book that I finished, I actually put in my storage unit so I don't have it to hold up, but I read Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This was like the biggest contemporary book of this year. Like, everyone was freaking out about it. I got it and I read it and I thought it was just okay. I gave it a 3-star. Basically, the biggest thing with this book is that there's like a plot twist that happens halfway through that I don't think anyone is a fan of. I genuinely just want to be like, David, why did you think that this would be a good idea? Because you literally, like, the first half of the book and the second half of the book almost like clash. Like, everything that we learn and do and see and stuff in the first half of the book is almost like negated in the second half of the book, and I don't know, I just wasn't a big fan of it. So there is like, again, there's like this plot twist that happens halfway through and I really wasn't a fan, and then I just had really mixed feelings about the second half of the book. So I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. This does have awesome Korean American representation and Korean representation and all of that, which is great, but I really want to know why David Yoon thought that was a good idea, because I don't know anyone who would like that plot twist. If there was like a list of kind of tropes that literally no one reading books likes, it's this. So I'm just like, David, why would you think that this was a good idea? Also, David's editor and publisher, why would you think that this was a good idea? Why would you let this happen? So yeah, it was good besides that. If that had just been gone, it would have been fine. Also, it would have shortened the book a lot, which I did feel like this book was a little bit too long. It's like almost 400 pages for a YA contemporary romance, and it just didn't need to be that long. I am interested to see what else he puts out, though, because I did love the conversations in this book and the representation. So the next book I finished was the most surprising book I've read this year, and that is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. If you guys watch my reading vlogs, you actually have probably heard me mention this quite a few times, and in book hauls and stuff. I picked this up when I went and visited Haley in Ohio in the summertime, and she had this copy that she was going to be getting rid of, and I was like, you know what, I'll take it because my library doesn't have Vicious and I do want to give this a try. But V.E. Schwab, I have either 1-starred or DNF'd every single book that I've read by her, and that's multiple books. I think I've tried 3 or 4 of her books before this, and I hated every single one of them. Basically, her premises are so cool to me, but her writing and execution of them always are really, really, really bad. So I wanted to try out Vicious, but again, my library doesn't have it, and I didn't want to pay for it because I was almost positive I would be DNFing this one as well. And so I picked this up, I read it, and I fucking loved it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Yeah, this is amazing. I am really upset because this was one of her first books. I think there's one before this, and then her books get worse. Like, they go downhill, which is so weird for a writer. So I doubt I'll be picking up anything else by her, but I am really happy I enjoyed this one. For people who somehow don't know what Vicious is about, it's about these 2 boys in college who want to make extraordinary people or superheroes and give themselves superpowers. They succeed, and it flashes back and forth between them during college and when they were friends, and present day when they hate each other and are trying to kill each other. And it was great. Her writing is so much better in this book, which is so confusing to me because, again, this is before most of her books come out. So I really don't know what happened. I don't know if V. Schwab was told to start writing in a different way, but this was like a completely different person in my personal opinion, and I loved it. And I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely my most shocking book of the year so far. Don't know if it's going to be on my best books of the year, but it's definitely my most surprising book of the year. And then I read a book that everyone was telling me to pick up, so I did, and I picked it up. And I loved it, spoiler alert, and that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawakachi. This book has blown up everywhere. I keep seeing people hauling it who like have never read Japanese literature before, and I'm so excited that Japanese lit is reaching more and more people. But yeah, this has blown up. I hear that it's all over the place, especially in the UK. I haven't really seen it in physical US stores, but again, I keep seeing people on BookTube hauling it and on Instagram hauling it who like never read this. So needless to say, I was pretty interested, and a ton of people were recommending it to me on my Japanese literature TBR and recommendation videos that I put out earlier. And I picked it up and I loved this, and I feel like I almost shouldn't have loved this because I picked it up thinking it was like a novel, which it is, but it is more short stories kind of thing. It's like 4 short stories basically, and I really don't like short stories, but this worked for me. This book is about a cafe where people can time travel. Basically, you have to sit in a specific chair and you're not allowed to get up, and you can time travel back in time or future in time, but you have to return before the coffee gets cold that you are drinking. You have to finish all of your coffee while you are time traveling, or you will become a ghost and have to sit in this chair at this cafe forever. And first off, I loved the twist that this book did with time travel. I thought it was so unique and so interesting, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the story with it. And then each story was so beautiful. Like, basically, we follow the main characters from the cafe, like, throughout the whole thing, and this cafe the whole time, but different characters are experiencing this time traveling thing. And it was beautiful, and I really, really loved it. It's just this tiny little volume, and I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely adored it, and I really highly recommend picking it up if that sounds interesting to you, or if you like Japanese literature, because I think this might be one that a lot of people could really, really enjoy and get them into the genre. And now we are getting into books that I read for Tome Topple. I did do 3 different reading vlogs for Tome Topple. They were a bit of a fail because 2 of these books I read the majority during Tome Topple and then had to finish afterwards. So, I mean, if you're interested, go watch those vlogs, but I did kind of fail Tome Topple. It's fine. But the first book that I read, which I did read really, really fast during Tome Topple, was, of course, The Toll by Neil Shusterman. This is the 3rd and final book of the Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman that everyone has been waiting for. I have been keeping up with the series since the release of book 1, and I've been obsessed with it since book 1. I absolutely love this story just like everyone else, and I was eagerly anticipating the 3rd and final book, and I absolutely devoured this. I read this like 650 page book in like 3 days, 2 days, something like that. I loved it. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5 stars. I can see some people not enjoying this ending, but I personally really, really liked it. This book was just a really great finale. We got a lot of loose ends tied up. I also love how Neil Shusterman really, is really good at reminding the reader what happened in the previous books. I really appreciate him for that because I didn't want to reread the 1st and 2nd book before getting into this because I just wanted to hop on in. And he definitely is really good at reminding you of what was happening before this book. Yeah, I loved this. I love all of the characters. I loved all of the plot lines, which is actually not usually something that happens for me. I usually really dislike at least one plot line or like person we're following, especially with Neil Shusterman in his previous series. I always had that one character I really didn't like, and these I just loved all of the characters, loved all of the perspectives. I loved the witty political commentary about America at the present right now. And yeah, I really like this. If you guys haven't picked this up and for some reason still need someone else to tell you to pick it up, go pick it up. And then I picked up Phil Pullman's The Secret Commonwealth, which is book 2 of the Book of Dust, and the Book of Dust is the first book, and that was a prequel to his Dark Materials or the Golden Compass trilogy, and then this is actually a sequel where we are following Lyra and Pan and our characters from the first original trilogy. And it's 10 years later, which I was really, really excited about. His Dark Materials was one of my favorite series as a child. I absolutely loved that series, and I was pretty disappointed in the Book of Dust. I think I gave it like a 2-star or something like that. I just found it really, really boring, but hearing that this was coming out, I knew I had to give it a chance, especially because Lyra is about 20 in this book. She was like 10 or 9, 11, somewhere around there in the first book, which was when I was reading it, I was that age, and now I'm 22 and she's 20, so it's kind of fun to be reading about this character that I read about as a child now is about my age. Unfortunately, this did fall a little bit flat for me. I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 star. Basically, this is too freaking long. This is so long for the fact that nothing happens. Like, this I didn't realize wasn't gonna stand alone as Lyra's story sequel. This is the definition of a setup book. Nothing happens in this. It is so much traveling around and meeting people who don't actually matter, and then nothing actually happens with the actual plot of the book. I know a couple people told me that this is in fact YA. I was kind of thinking of it as middle grade because I read the original trilogy when I was kind of middle grade. And I know it's YA, but it does suffer from the middle grade thing that I personally hate, which is the main character goes and meets a bunch of people who don't actually matter and helps them on their own little journey, and you get their entire fucking backstory, and then they don't matter. Who cares about them? Just meeting tons and tons of characters for no fucking reason. That happens a lot in this book, and I hate that. Also, again, nothing happens. We also have so many characters that I don't care about at all. I just want to read about Lyra and Pan, and also if you took out all of that stuff that I just mentioned, it would be a 200-page book. So I enjoyed this because I really loved being back in that world with Lyra and Pan and all of them, but it was such a letdown in the fact that nothing happened, and it was honestly really boring. I was definitely skimming some pages by the end just to get back to Lyra and Pan because I didn't care about what was happening with other characters. So yeah, I'd give this a 3 out of 5 star. If you're a big Dark Materials fan, I do recommend picking it up, but just know there's gonna be another book after this. This doesn't wrap up nicely like the Book of Dust does, so. And then the big daddy of a book that I read this month was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Stormlight Archives, which this is a book that I buddy read with Haley. We read the first book together 2 summers ago, 2018 summer, and it took us this long to finally pick up the second book, which we don't know why. We love the first book. We love this book. You know. I think I give this the same rating as I gave the first one, 4.5 out of 5 stars, but for different reasons. This one focuses a lot more on the characters, while the first one had a lot more kind of action and plot-driven stuff. This one focused a lot more on characters, which I actually prefer. I really don't like politics and war and fighting and stuff in my fantasies, which is why I don't like a lot of fantasy anymore. But yeah, this, I loved characters coming together. I love one romance that's happening, really, really hate another romance that's happening, and if one romance happens with the other, I will actually stop reading the series. Just gonna say it. I love the developing the world. I love all of that. I love how much information we got. It was a really fun time. Again, this is the second book, so I can't talk too much about it, but if you haven't picked this up and you love fantasy, obviously I'm gonna say pick it up. Oh, and then I really quickly listened to on audiobook The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn, the person who wrote Gone Girl. This was just a really quick little audiobook that I listened to when I had nothing else to listen to or read, and I really didn't care about this. I give it 2.5 out of 5 stars. It felt like the beginning was so good. It really felt like Gillian was kind of setting up for a full-length novel, and then she got bored with the story and was like, I'm just gonna end it right now. And it was stupid, and I really didn't like it. So, yeah, 2.5 out of 5 stars for that one. That's all I got to say about it, because it's only 65 pages. If you want to read it or know what happened, just go read it. 65 pages. Alright, and now I'm going to get into books that I read for class. So the first book that I read for one of my classes was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is the second time I read this. I read this last October, didn't love it, and now I had to read it again this October, and I had to go repurchase it because I got rid of my original copy. That was great. Yeah, it's just okay. I don't find it very scary. I listened to the audiobook, which made it honestly a lot better, and yeah. If you don't know what The Haunting of Hill House is, it's a haunted house story. These people go and hang out at this house and are trying to figure out some stuff about it. Honestly, I read it because I was interested, because I read this article about House of Leaves being a retelling of Haunting of Hill House, and Haunting of Hill House being a retelling of Fall of the House of Usher, and I was interested in that kind of plotline, storyline idea. So yeah, that's honestly what got me through it this time. And the audiobook, I liked the audiobook, it was pretty good. And from my post-colonialism class, we read The Lives of Animals by J.M. Coetzee. This one I had to do a whole presentation about. This is a section of Elizabeth Costello, which is a full-length novel, but this is his lecture narrative that he gave at some conference at some point, and then he made later into Elizabeth Costello, like the full-length novel. But yeah, this is a two-part lecture narrative where Coetzee is telling the story of a writer at a conference, telling a conference about vegetarianism and the treatment of animals. And I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really like Coetzee. He's one of my favorites at the moment. And yeah, I had a lot to say about this. Definitely annotated it quite a lot. And I really enjoyed our discussion about it. Probably going to be using this for my final essay. So there you go. And now I'm going to be talking about some books that I read for my adaptations class. First off, we finally finished reading this little textbook that we have, which is Adaptation and Appropriation by Julie Saunders. This is just a little textbook that we got to kind of read through as we were talking about different parts of adaptation. So we finally finished it this month. So there's that. I did think this was a really good introduction to adaptation. I don't really know how to rate nonfiction. You're gonna find that with a lot of the books. I just don't know how to rate them. I guess I'd give this like a 4-star. It's helpful. It's really, really helpful if you're into adaptation studies. And then we read Much Ado About Nothing by Shakespeare, which I literally read earlier this year for a different class, so this is the second time I'm reading it this year. I really love this play. It's one of my favorite comedies. It's not my favorite, but it's one of my favorites. I really enjoyed it, especially this time we were looking at it as a source material for Pride and Prejudice, like Pride and Prejudice being a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, which I really, really enjoyed kind of looking at that narrative through line. Again, I really enjoyed this play. I think it's one of the ones I've read the most. I want to say I've read it 4 or 5 times now. I still really enjoy it. I love Beatrice and Benedict. Who the fuck cares about what's his name? Claudio in Hero? Is that who's this one? See, I don't even care about them. So yeah, I read that one. 4 out of 5 stars. And then of course we read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This was my first time actually getting through Pride and Prejudice. I have tried reading it like 2 or 3 times in the past. It's just not my thing. I really don't really like the writing. I don't really like the story. It's kind of boring. Not much happens in it. But I finally got through it this time, and I have come to have a greater appreciation for it because of reading it and studying it so closely with a lot of adaptations and stuff. And I do realize that this is such a basis for most romance novels. And it kicked off a huge part of literature. So for that, I can definitely appreciate it. I just personally didn't enjoy it that much. So I think I'd probably give this like a 2.5 to 3 stars generously. But yeah, the actual book I didn't enjoy it that much. I liked the conversation about it though. And then we read some dumb shit, and that's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. If you want to talk dumb retellings, this give this like a 2-star. It's literally like kind of plagiarized Pride and Prejudice, like giant sections of text just taken from Pride and Prejudice and put into this, and then like a little bit about some zombies, and that's about it. We got some drawings too. Yeah, this is, I don't care. I give it like 2 stars. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And then I read some research material. So the first one I read was for Shakespeare. This is for my final. I'm doing feminist or feminine sexuality, female sexuality in Ovid and Shakespeare. So I picked up this actually quite a while ago and I finally used it, and that is Shakespeare, Feminism, and Gender. Unfortunately, this didn't really help me with what I needed it to help me with, but I do think it was a pretty good introduction to this like subject of Shakespeare, so I'd probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5 star. It wasn't helpful to me personally in this essay, but it was a very good overview of feminism in Shakespeare. Then I read 3 different books all about disabilities and disability studies. I am doing a paper or conference paper about disability studies in literature, so I obviously had to read some. I read No Pity by Joseph Shapiro. Yeah, so this was a lot about just disability representation in media and in our modern society, because people always think, you know, when they think a disability, they think Tiny Tim, or someone who's very like unable to do things, and kind of talking about that and looking at those stereotypes and portrayals in the media. So that was helpful. I also have Nothing About Us Without Us by James Charlton, who is a big name in disability studies. If you've ever done disability studies, you've probably read something by him. This was super, super helpful, and I'm using it a lot in my essay. I'm using a lot of the introduction, Nothing About Us Without Us, which is basically talking about giving people with disabilities a voice, because that's honestly what my conference paper is about, the voicelessness of children with disabilities, and how people with disabilities like never actually get to talk about what's good for themselves, and people like able-bodied people and neurotypical people just like to say what's good for people with disabilities, and it's bullshit. So I really liked that part of it. And I also used Empowered Consciousness in the Philosophy of Empowerment. And so yeah, this is a really great, very accessible piece on disability studies if you guys are interested. Definitely a good place to start if you're interested in that subject. It's a very good overview. And then I read one called Disabled People and the Right to Life, edited by Luke Clements and Jeanette Reed. This one is kind of all about what it suggests. Disabled people and the right to life. So this one is a lot about human rights, like life, disability, and the pursuit of human rights, the right to life with disabilities, it's my life, it's my decision, assisted dying versus assisted living, abortion, stuff like that, which these are subjects I'm pretty heated about, especially like, I don't know if a lot of people saw it going around, like the acts trying to be in place to like abort any babies who seem to have Down syndrome in the womb, and like this idea that it's better to like abort a completely healthy child that the parents want if it has Down syndrome, just because like it's not quality of life if they have Down syndrome, which is fucking bullshit. And then also assisted dying versus assisted living, I personally am pretty heated about. Also, actually, ever since my death and dying class at the beginning of this year, that we watched a lot about it, because why are we assisted living people like who don't want to be living, but we have a whole thing about not being able to die and all of that. It's a very interesting topic. This one I would suggest kind of having a background in disability studies before reading, but it was also a really, really good and very interesting read. So really liked that one. Alright, so those are all of the books that I read this November. I hope you guys all enjoyed this wrap up, and definitely tell me down below if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought about them. Anyways, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and I love y'all, and I'll see y'all soon. Bye!